Let's dive into this. The core medical issue we're addressing today is partial rectal prolapse. Basically, it's a condition where the tissue lining the rectum drops down into or completely through the anal opening. Now, initially, doctors will try conservative measures to treat this, right? But what happens when those standard, non-surgical treatments just don't work? How exactly do you fix a partial rectal prolapse when those conservative measures fail? Well, that's the exact focus of our explainer today. How the Thiersch Operation steps in to physically and biologically fix this very specific type of prolapse.
Here's our surgical briefing for today. First, we'll look at when conservative measures fail. Second, the operation setup. Third, we'll go through the step-by-step surgical procedure. Fourth, the mechanical and chemical support. And finally, complications and pediatric care.
Section 1. When conservative measures fail.
So when those initial treatments fall short, the Thiersch operation is deployed. It's a highly successful single operation for partial rectal prolapse. And what's incredibly reassuring about this procedure is its high success rate across the board. The medical text emphasize that it is almost certain to succeed. And even more impressively, it's a viable option for patients of literally any age. That's a really crucial detail we'll expand on a bit later.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Thiersch Operation Setup.
I want you to try and visualize this setup. The entire foundation of the surgery relies on just two small incisions. One midline incision is made directly in front of the anal opening, and another one is made directly behind it. Both of these are situated about ½ an inch away from the opening itself, and these two tiny gateways are literally all the surgeon needs to begin constructing the support structure.
Now, the crucial tool that goes through those incisions is a 20-gauge wire. The surgeon uses a long, curved needle to thread either a silver wire or a stainless steel wire of this specific thickness. This wire is the essential tactile material used to create the physical support ring that's going to ultimately keep that tissue from prolapsing.
Section 3. The step-by-step surgical procedure.
The whole process is remarkably straightforward. It's almost like threading a drawstring around the waist of a pair of sweatpants. First, that long curved needle is passed from the posterior incision around ½ of the anus, emerging at the anterior incision. Second, the 20-gauge wire is threaded through the eye of the needle and pulled completely through so it traverses half the circumference. Third, the needle is taken out, reinserted into that back incision and passed around the opposite side to meet at the front again, pulling the other end of the wire with it. Fourth, the surgeon actually gauges the tightness. And finally, the wire is twisted tight, cut short, and those two small incisions are stitched closed.
And this brilliantly illustrates that fourth step. Notice how the surgeon introduces their index finger directly through the anus while the assistant twists the wire. The surgeon isn't relying on a machine or a monitor here, right? They're using their own physical touch. They're actively feeling the tension to gauge exactly how tight that silver or stainless steel ring is becoming.
Here we get another look that really helps visualize that continuous loop being created. The wire completely encircles the tissue, traversing the entire circumference of the anus right under the skin. Once that full loop is made, the assistant twists the two ends of the wire together really tightly to secure the knot, which creates a firm, unyielding ring. The absolute precision of this operation comes down to this specific sensory detail. When the finger can be just sufficiently passed through the anus, the twisted wire ends are cut short. It's this fascinating blend of rigid hardware, stainless steel wire, and the delicate, precise biological measurement of the surgeon's own index finger. This ensures the ring is tightened perfectly, not too loose to allow a prolapse, and definitely not too tight to cause obstruction.
Section 4. Mechanical and chemical support. First, we have the immediate physical fix. The suture material is actively passed right through the substance of the internal sphincter. This acts exactly like a mechanical drawstring. It provides an immediate physical restriction that literally blocks the rectal tissue from prolapsing outward. It's the obvious mechanical fix, but there is a secret secondary weapon at play here.
Now, what's really interesting here is the concept of chemical support. You see, the mere presence of the wire inside the body triggers a localized healing response. The body naturally creates fibrous deposits and scarring around the anal canal right where the wire was placed. So the body's own chemical healing process actually steps in to build a wall of structural reinforcement, making the area vastly stronger than it was before the surgery even happened.
Section 5. Complications and pediatric care.
We noted earlier that patients of any age can undergo this procedure. However, look at the stark contrast in how it's actually performed. For adults, surgeons use silver or stainless wire and gauge tightness with their index finger. But for children, the surgeon uses strong chromic catgut instead of metal wire, and they must use their little finger as the gauge. The absolute most crucial takeaway here is that in children, the stitch literally must be removed. If it's left in as the child grows, it will result in a dangerous narrowing called anal stenosis.
Speaking of removal, even for standard adult cases using the metal wire, the structure isn't always meant to be there forever. If required, the wire can safely be taken out after about 3 months. By this time, the body has usually done its work.
So why might it need to be removed? Well, the main complication of this operation is that the wound may develop a discharging sinus, which is essentially a tract of infection or inflammation. If this occurs, the wire absolutely must be removed. But here is the brilliant safety net of the Thiersch operation. Even if this primary complication happens and you have to pull the wire, usually by that time, enough fibrosis has already occurred to prevent further prolapse anyway. And hey, if the prolapse ever does recur in the future, the operation can simply be repeated.
So the crucial point we really want you to take away from this is that the temporary mechanical fix of the wire acts as a scaffold. It holds everything in place just long enough to initiate a permanent biological solution. The resulting fibrous deposits leave behind a natural barrier against prolapse that remains long after the wire is gone.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Isn't it absolutely fascinating how a simple mechanical loop, carefully threaded and tightened by a surgeon's touch, can trigger the body's own chemical healing process to permanently fix such a complex problem? It's really a perfect marriage of surgical engineering and human
Map for today. First, we'll cover the prolapse problem. Then we'll break down System 1, stapled hemorrhoidopexy, System 2, excisional repair, and System 3, mucosal excision, before wrapping up by weighing the risks and recovery.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the prolapse problem. We really have to define the failure before we can even begin to understand the fix.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that these surgeries are specifically indicated for symptomatic grade 3 and IV internal hemorrhoids. These are the ones that physically bulge outward when non-surgical methods fail. This isn't just minor swelling. At this advanced stage, the internal tissues have completely lost their anatomical anchoring. The tissue bulges out, and this is frequently combined with a partial or mucosal rectal prolapse. Essentially, the lining of the rectum itself is slipping downward. It's a major structural displacement that demands a structural solution.
Which brings us to Section 2. Let's look at System 1, stapled hemorrhoidopexy. It's a truly modern, minimally invasive marvel.
The logic here is honestly exactly like tailoring. Rather than using traditional methods where you're simply cutting out the hemorrhoidal tissue from the bottom, this system uses a completely different approach. A specialized circular stapling device is used to excise a ring of redundant rectal tissue higher up. By removing this specific ring of excess tissue, it cuts off the blood supply to the hemorrhoids, which forces them to shrink over time. But the real genius is what happens at the exact same time. The device actually pulls and anchors that displaced, prolapsed mucosa right back up into its normal, healthy anatomical position. It's literally like taking in the waistline of a pair of pants from the inside.
So how do the mechanics of this actually play out? Well, the procedure cleverly navigates the body's anatomy to minimize pain. After anesthesia and a gentle dilation of the canal, the real magic happens. A circular purse string suture is applied inside the rectum, specifically above what's called the dentate line. Now, why does that matter to the patient? Because that area above the dentate line is completely devoid of pain-sensing nerves. Then, the circular stapler draws the excess tissue in, fires a row of internal staples, and lifts everything up. Because everything is done internally above that nerve line, there are absolutely zero external incisions or wounds. It's brilliant.
But, what if the stapling technique isn't an option? Let's move to Section 3 to look at System 2, excisional repair.
If stapling isn't suitable, say a patient has severe, multi-component disease with significant outer skin tags, surgeons pivot to System 2. While System 1 is this elegant internal lift, it actually has exclusion criteria. It's just not effective for severe external issues. So System 2 steps in using a traditional scalpel or a modern energy device to physically remove the hemorrhoid columns, alongside a localized mucosal repair. It's your more direct, traditional removal strategy when that internal tailoring from System 1 just can't fix the outer external problems.
Next up is Section 4, exploring System 3, mucosal excision. This builds on the previous methods, but is used for a very specific scenario.
The mechanical precision of what's called Goodsalls ligature is just fascinating.
While System 1 handles the entire circular circumference of the canal, if the partial prolapse is isolated to just one specific part of that circumference, surgeons use System 3. They address the base of that localized prolapse by transfixing it twice with a ligature. That ligature is tightened to really secure the base, and only then is the redundant mucosa excised. Finally, the cut margins are sutured together. It is a highly targeted, localized approach specifically designed for partial prolapses associated with third-degree hemorrhoids.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, weighing outcomes, risks, and recovery. It's time for a reality check on these 3 engineering feats and what the patient journey actually looks like post-op.
The clinical data maps out how the rapid elimination of bleeding and shorter hospital stays have to be weighed against longer-term risks. Looking at the benefits, minimally invasive procedures like System 1 offer incredibly fast recovery times. Patients return to work much sooner, and a lot of them even go home the exact same day. The short-term satisfaction is super high. But on the flip side, patients do face risks. There's a higher long-term reoccurrence rate, especially for severe grade 4 issues. You also have risks like anal stenosis, which is a narrowing of the canal caused by internal scarring, and a temporary feeling of urgency or pressure following the surgery. And of course, in very rare cases, there can be severe risks like rectal perforation or pelvic infection. It's a delicate balance.
Post-surgery, all that internal tailoring needs time to set, so patients undergo a 4 to 6 week recovery protocol. While the hospital stay is super brief, the at-home aftercare is absolutely make or break here. To protect those internal sutures and staples, patients have to stick to a strict diet of high-fiber foods, lots of fluids, and stool softeners. The whole goal is to completely avoid any straining or constipation while the tissues fuse into the new anatomical positions. During those 4 to 6 weeks, light activities are fine, but heavy lifting or intense physical straining is a strict no-go.
It really leaves you wondering exactly how much more precise and seamless these biological engineering solutions can become in the future. We've moved from simple excision to complex internal stapling that actually utilizes the layout of the nervous system to eliminate pain. The logic.
If you found this video informative, please like and share, comment what you would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel to get notified about future informative videos.